This is a piece of tool steel. This is A2. That means it's air hardening. And heat it up to the critical temperature and hold it for a predetermined length of time. And at that point, you take it out of the furnace and you let it dry, or excuse me, let it quench in the air. You don't dunk it in oil or water or anything. It makes it pretty nice to work with. It's you don't have to worry about how you cool it. Just let it cool in the air. Once it's been hardened and cooled, it's really brittle, and you have to break it down a little bit by tempering it. And what that does is it draws the hardness back out of it a little bit, not completely, but just enough to where it makes it a little more durable, a little more tough. With A2, you have to temper it twice, and I do that in my kitchen oven at 375 degrees. I can't remember. I'll have to look at my notes. I'm thinking like 2 hours. Take it out, let it cool to room temperature, put it back in for another 2 hours, take it out, let it cool, and you're done. Most tool steels in their pre-hardened state are not any harder than a mild steel, so you can cut it with a hacksaw or whatever type of tools you would normally use by hand. And that's what I'm going to do here, is just cut it with a hacksaw. I've got a metal cutting bandsaw, but it's kind of stuck back in the corner and a little too much trouble to dig out for this one cut. I've cut my tool steel to make two 6-inch long blades. Again, these are 2 inches wide by 3/16 thick. Now if you look at those, they look just like any other steel. Just glancing at it, you can't tell if it's tool steel, mild steel, low carbon, whatever. The only way you really know is when you purchase it. It comes in a package that tells you what it is. This is A2 air hardening tool steel. And they also put their dimensions on there, at least the vendor I bought this from. So it's important to keep it in the packaging until you use it, or at least write on it what it is if you're not going to keep it in the package. On the blade I made for my first plane, on the top of the blade all I did was bevel off the corners here, which is kind of a traditional shape. I think I'm going to try something a little different on this new one. I've got a center line marked on this piece of tape down the center of the 2-inch width, and I'm going to go with a 2-inch radius and just scribe that on there as a kind of a circular top on there, just a slight bit. That tape will help hold my scribe in place. I'll just mark a line in the layout fluid and I'll cut it down with a hacksaw and then file it to shape. Here's the blade after it's been shaped with a tombstone shape on the top. It's sanded to 400 grit on all the sides and edges. I need to grind the bevel and do the heat treat on it and then finish grinding the edge, and it should be ready for action. Alright, I'm getting ready to start the heat treat process on a couple of blades here. I use stainless steel foil tool wrap to keep the oxygen away from the steel while it's at critical temperature. This reduces the chance of scaling and oxidation. And it's just it's stainless steel. It's 2/1000 inch thick. It's a little stiffer than aluminum foil, obviously, but it's not too bad to work with. When I put my blade in the foil, I'm going to throw a couple slips of paper in on one on each side of it. Any trapped oxygen inside the envelope will burn away at a low burning point where the paper will burn, and that way when the blade gets up to its critical temperature, the oxygen will be depleted from there and won't cause any scale or oxidation, or very little. So I'm just going to fold this up. And crimp the ends, fold them over a couple of times, try and get it as airtight as possible. Now, even though this stainless is only about 2/1000ths of an inch thick, when you double it and start bending it gets pretty stiff. So you've really got to work it. And what I use to flatten the seam, I've got an old hand seamer for sheet metal work. It's an old kind of wore out thing, but it works pretty well for this. I'll just crimp those seams nice and flat before I fold it over again. Okay, and that's pretty much what you end up with. You can see the outline of the blade in there because I pushed that down on there, but there is a little bit of airspace in there. And it'll sit up on edge. I'll probably stand it up like this to make sure the bottom of the blade is suspended above the bottom of the furnace, that it can get, good heat circulation anyway. And I'll stand it up in the furnace like this. Okay, one down, one to go. I've cut some small pieces of fire brick and set them inside the oven to hold the blades upright. I've got one blade in there, and I'm going to go ahead and come in and stand this other one up. It's pretty much just the tool wrap that's holding these. The blades are pretty well suspended away from the fire bricks, and it should get a good even heat. Alright, go ahead and close up the oven. Get my lid centered on there where it fits good. And I'll go ahead and see if I can set the temperature here. Alright, we'll set it to 600 to start out with. We'll ramp this up in a few steps so that we don't shock anything. And go ahead and turn on the heating element. This is about a 3600 watt oven, and if you just set it at 1750 and turned it on, it'd get there so fast it would probably be detrimental to your alloy. I don't know that A2 is not resistant to that type of shock, but there's no sense taking a chance. So we'll step this up in 3 or 4 steps. It will stop for 10 or 15 minutes at each temperature to let it kind of equalize and heat through before going up to the next temperature. Alright, my steel's been in the furnace at temperature for about 45 minutes, so it should be good. I'm going to kill the furnace and get geared up here and pull them out and finish this up. These are still glowing orange, and I really don't want to unpackage them until they've cooled a little bit. So I'm going to cheat on this first one just a bit. Try and cheat it. Just running on edge here up against the fan just to get it below critical temperature. Before I expose it to air. And I think we're probably about good there. The second one probably won't need the fan because it's already cooling over on the cast iron table. The tool wrap gets pretty stiff after it's been heated. Scissors would have a hard time with it now, so I have to use a tin snip. Yeah, she's still glowing just a little. Should have left her just a little bit longer. Come on. There we go. Now, what I'd like to do, another pair of pliers on this. Pull it out of this envelope. I'm just going to lay it across a couple of blocks of aluminum here, and I'm going to stick a straight edge on it real quick to make sure it hasn't warped. And it looks good. I'm just going to stick it on this mag chuck, where as soon as I get the other one going, we'll lock them down with the magnet. They should stay flat while they cool. Lock them down on that mag chuck and let them cool. And there they are. They're a little blue from the heat treat. And as soon as they're cool enough to touch, they'll be ready to go in the kitchen oven for temper at 375 for 2 hours. They'll come out, cool to the touch again, go back in for another 2 hours. Once they come out and cool, they should be finished.